We are in a place right now which I consider really one of the hidden gems, I guess you could call it, in the land of Israel. Tell us about where we are right now.
All right, so funny enough, the only place in the modern city of Akko that is completely empty and the only sound you hear is the crickets is actually where the city started. We're standing over the hill that contained a heavily fortified city that was existing for, give or take, 5,000 years.
One of the oldest inhabited cities in world history,
One
right?
of the old port in history, indeed.
Wow.
It was a Canaanite city, Phoenician city. It was always the key to enter to the Galilee. In times of peace, it is a flourishing commercial center, and in times of war, a very important logistic base for invading armies.
Yeah, and again, a major entry point to the land of Israel.
That's right. Time and again, armies from the days of Napoleon and older in the Dark Ages, the wars between the Muslims and the Crusaders. Before that, the Roman army versus the Jews. And before that, the Jews versus the Greeks. And it goes on and on and on. The history of Akko reached the very foundations of the days of the Bible.
Yeah.
And even older than the tribes of the Israelites.
There was an attempt in those times to take this city.
That's right.
But it didn't go so well, right?
Didn't go so well. The only time that Akko is mentioned in the Holy Book is actually the attack or the failure of the tribe of Aser in the book of Judges to capture this place from the Canaanite inhabitants. And therefore, this city, from this point onward, was never actually a fully Jewish city until 1948, until Israel was born.
Very interesting.
That's why Jews that dwelled in the old city of Akko actually buried their dead a few miles inland to make sure that they will be buried inside the perimeter of the Holy Land.
Akko was not necessarily by the Jewish people at that time in Bible times considered a part of the Holy Land.
That's right, and we also know that as part of his agreements with the king of Tyre, the great king Solomon actually gave up his claims on these areas as part of his alliance, so that even made sure that this place will stay outside of Jewish reach, literally until 1948.
Amit, to the point where Jews would not be buried here. Wow, that says something. But that wasn't the end of the biblical links in this historic city. Take us up to the New Testament.
In the New Testament, it was also mentioned in the book of Acts when Saint Paul walked through the city and visited the believers here on his way to Tyre. It is showing us also how important this place was, even if it is just a good place to stop on the way as you go on the coast.
Yeah, and Amit, that's only the beginning of the rich history of this city, Akko. Again, one of the hidden gems, but we will bring it all to light for our viewers today. Where are we going next?
We are going now to walk into the old city itself, which is a bit confusing because it is there only for the last, give or take, 2,300 centuries. So it kind of slided down from the hill to where it is today, a peninsula that protects the port from almost all sides.
Wow, the famous walls of Akko, a tough place to penetrate for invading armies as well, as you'll tell us today.
Yep.
Well, Amit, let's go.
Let's go.
Amit, there's so much to see here in Akko. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Now, UNESCO doesn't get much right when it comes to Israel, but this they did get right, thank God. Tell us where we are right now. Really one of the most legendary spots in this whole city, right?
Yes, absolutely. This is the most fortified part of the city. What you have here is an amazingly well-preserved Crusader Castle. Above its ruins, the Turks built this magnificent palace that you see today, heavily fortified, and the British used it later on as a prison. This place suffered lots of scars of war.
These look like cannonballs.
Those are cannonballs. Those iron ones are from the attack of Napoleon on
Which
the
we will
city.
talk about a bit later in the show.
And this bigger one is a boulder fired by Muslim trebuchets on the walls of the Crusader city in 1291 when they attacked and destroyed Akko.
Amazing. Look, like you said, Crusader Castle, then the Ottoman Turkish structure. The Brits were here with a prison. It just shows you the history of this site, the rich history, and even the walls here. This is sandstone, right?
That's right. The sandstone is what connects all the different periods here because everybody built with those brown hard rocks. Just like Jerusalem is completely white because of the limestone, Akko is brown because of the sandstone.
Well, let's go inside. It's about to get very interesting, folks. Well, Amit, we are inside the castle. As you said, so much history here through the centuries, but let's start with the Crusader role in this very, very vast and impressive structure.
Yes, they built it very big. I guess they did it because they could, because they wanted to project their power, to show how rich and huge their castles were. This is just one of the castles of the Crusaders that were built here during the 12th and 13th centuries.
And this is European style, right? The style of architecture.
Definitely European style, yes. Romanesque, early Gothic styles that you know from back home in Europe.
Yeah.
And this is only the lower floor. There were 2 more floors above it. This was a huge building that people could see from afar.
Yeah.
The famous Hospitaller Order was the one that owned this place.
From France, originally?
They were formed here actually, but eventually they had about, at their peak, 19,000 possessions all over the world.
Wow.
This is just one of them.
And they originated in Europe, but it was not easy for the Crusaders, again, we talked about this earlier, I mean, not easy for the Crusaders to seize Akko, right? Now, shortly after the First Crusade, they conquered Akko, they built this structure. How did that all go down?
They built this castle mainly through the 13th century, toward the end of their kingdom. And with all their might, yes, eventually when an army of close to 200,000 Muslims attacked Akko and 14,000 Crusaders defended it, they stood no chance.
Yeah.
And despite their bravery, and they fought hard, 3 months, one by one, their towers and walls have been destroyed. And eventually this place was destroyed, and the Muslim strategy was to raise those coastal plain cities to the ground so the Crusaders will never use them again.
Never return.
As a base of operation, exactly, as a bridgehead.
And the Mamelukes, the Muslim armies, I mean, systematically did that along the coast.
They did it. That was the end of so many cities and a terrible death blow to the economy of the Holy Land, which deteriorated the population as it was never before.
Yeah. And you could say when Akko fell, kind of the Western presence in that period, the Crusader period, ended.
That pretty much ended shortly after the fall of their last large stronghold. Yeah. All the Crusaders have been gone.
Okay, so then the Ottomans, Muslims, took control of this castle. Take us a little bit through that period and bring us up to the modern day with the Brits and what the British were doing here.
The Ottoman Empire was once again a naval power. They needed to reconstruct the coastal cities, and therefore they revived 2 old cities in the Holy Land, which is Jaffa, south of us, and Akko, the gate to the Galilee again. They found a pile of ruins here. Those huge holes, imagine that, were filled all the way to the top with sand, broken stones, bones of humans and animals, debris. Later on, of course, in archaeological treasure, they found cannons lying down over here. But anyways, the Ottomans turned this place into a stronghold again, and they used it also as a prison. When their turn to live the history of the Holy Land came in World War I, the British Army turned this place into a prison again. It was a terrible place.
Yeah, a lot of abuse here, and there was a very famous, a lot of the Jewish people were imprisoned here as Israel was being reborn, that whole period.
Prisoners of the Jewish underground, yes.
Yeah, and there was a famous prison break here. Amit, tell us about that.
Well, yeah, that was in May 1947 when the famous Irgun of Menachem Begin,
former Israeli Prime Minister, of course.
Of course, smuggled explosives into the prison and at the same time blew up a bomb on the other side of the wall. Wow. And almost 200 prisoners escaped. Many of them were Jews, but also lots of Arab prisoners who were imprisoned here as well, which was a major blow to the British prestige and humiliation to the crown.
Yeah, and they eventually left. They flew the coop. They went back to Britain shortly thereafter.
A year later, Israel was born.
Yes, it was. Miraculously reborn. Last question, Amit, as we're here in this amazing structure. We see the cannons. Tell us about some more of the features. There's even a medieval dungeon here, if I'm not mistaken.
There is. You don't want to be locked on this one. They even found the places where the prisoners were tied up to the walls to starve slowly in the dark dungeon. And they found an amazing refectorium, which is the dining hall of the Crusaders, secret exits to the ancient street, chambers of churches, Even the latrines, which is the bathrooms of the Crusader time, were found here in an amazing shape.
It's a very mysterious place.
It is, and the problem with archaeology is that whenever you reveal something, it just raises more questions.
Yeah.
Most of this castle was never even fully excavated, and this is just one castle. So there is a city under the street of what is now called the old city of Akko.
Well, that's only the beginning of the history here in Akko, layer after layer as you just described. And folks, after the break, another layer of the amazing history of this city. Napoleon, a guy is slightly shorter than me, also had a major role here in the history of Akko. Find out what Napoleon did in this beautiful city, Akko, Israel. After the break, it's The Watchmen, it's Christians United for Israel, only right here on TBN from Akko. Stick around.